The last time we lost a home game to Millwall was actually at the Dell in 1989. So it's safe to say we all thought this would be a routine home win at the weekend. I mean, Millwall had lost their last 4 games. I think it was a new manager in the dugout. So I'm just going to start with you this week, Steve. What on earth went wrong? Where do we start with that performance at the weekend?
We just fell into all the usual traps against a side that came. I mean, the second half especially, we're quite happy just to stick bodies in the way and not leave any spaces. No interest in getting beyond the halfway line, certainly. But I mean, first half, I actually thought we played quite well. We opened up the space. We were patient at the right times, and that was borne out by how the equaliser came about, because there were 2 or 3 opportunities for people to put the ball into the box, but actually that was the wrong move because they had bodies in there. And then as soon as we recycled it back out to Stu Armstrong, then all of a sudden you got Adams in the middle between 2 centre backs. He's played a perfect pass in, and we got the equaliser. Didn't create too many proper chances, but you could see that we were opening them up in certain areas. And I mean, one thing I noticed, like literally just before they got the penalty to make it 2-1, their right back tried to basically just lump the ball clear as far as he could possibly kick it, and that distance in terms of as far as he could kick it was about 15 yards, because he just looked absolutely exhausted. He looked dead on his feet already, and you're thinking, well, okay, well, we just keep going. This is a matter of time. And then all of a sudden, they switch on a little bit more in attack. Zian Fleming gets into a good position, plays it across, and I mean the handball. I mean you've seen them give and you've seen them not, and the problem is that there weren't too many complaints from Saints players, so it's one of those you can't really argue too much about. You certainly want it given your way. The problem I've got really is the first goal is that, I mean, you know that the main thing that Millwall are going to bring to the party under Neil Harris, given what we saw from his Gillingham side back in August, is they're going to put any set piece opportunity they've got, they're going to lump it into the box, and they've got a massive centre half, Cooper, who is going to be a massive distraction and a massive threat, and the other centre back, Tanganga, who ended up getting the goal, is big enough as well. And I mean, from where I was in the Northern, it looked like he'd massively overhit it, hit the free kick, and that Bazunu was just going to come out and was just going to claim it just above his head, and no danger, and we're then on the counter attack. But I don't know why Bazunu's tried to kind of catch it at chest height, sort of with his hands under the ball, as opposed to sort of over the top, and yeah, as a result, that then basically gives up the advantage that the keeper has in that he can use his arms, and Tanganga gets up and gets the header. I do kind of think that someone might have been able to at least try and sort of lunge at it while it was sort of looping, sort of in slow motion towards the back of the net. But I mean, 5 minutes in, you kind of thinking, well, that's annoying, but let's see how it goes. And I kind of went in at half time and I thought, well, if we play like that in the second half, then they'll have no energy and we will find the gaps. But we didn't, unfortunately. We fell into sort of bad old ways of passing it side to side with no real pace or sort of plan of how we were going to kind of break the lines. And while, I mean, we've given Russell Martin a lot of praise this season for the way that he's been able to bring substitutes on and they've had an impact. I think, as I said the other week, we've scored 20 goals from the bench this season, which is basically a quarter of our goals in all competitions. And but unfortunately, the subs had basically no impact or negative impact. Taking Adams off meant that we didn't have the kind of plan A and a half option of dinking the ball over the midfield into his chest to break any sort of midfield sort of pressing that Millwall were putting onto us, which wasn't a great deal, but there was a little bit of space in there that we could have worked with. But taking Adams out of the team basically removed that as an option. So the only ways we had was either down the sides or through somebody doing something ridiculous in sort of postage stamp space in the middle, and they were just crowding us out. And yeah, it was just so frustrating. I mean, I know Russell Martin wasn't happy with what sort of Millwall's tactics in terms of the physicality and the time wasting, but at the end of the day, that's on the referee. And it looked first 10 minutes like he was going to stamp down on it. 2 bookings early on for them for fairly late challenges, and he thought, okay, well he's seen what this is going to be like, and he's on it already. But that was basically the end of it. He decided after that point that that he wasn't too bothered, wasn't going to get involved. And of course, there was the most predictable thing of all, where the keeper gets booked in the 91st minute, where it has absolutely no impact whatsoever. So yeah, I mean, massively frustrating, especially on the back of the sort of three of the last 4 games now we've lost, and frankly, the games we've lost, we've not really looked like getting anything out of. Unfortunately, bad time to be hitting that little rough patch.
Yeah, we'll get onto that as well in a minute. Glenn, Russell Martin said afterwards that the tactics weren't the problem, but I think we need to talk about the tactics because we saw the team news, obviously. We saw that Flynn Downs wasn't on the team sheet. You see that midfield 3 and you go, okay, that we might be in with a shout here. We should be okay. And then we've got Jack Stevens playing as a hybrid defender / midfielder, Carl Walker-Peters on the left, and it looked like Harwood-Bellis kind of slotting in at the right. It seemed a bit more complicated than it needed to be to me.
Yes, unnecessarily overcomplicated bollocks was how I put it at the time, and
You're standing by that now, are you?
Absolutely. I mean, we went for different tactics against West Brom because they're a good side, and we were away from home, and you could see they posed a specific threat, and we set up our team accordingly, put some bigger players in to cope with the set pieces, blah blah blah. And I could understand changing the tactics for West Brom, but this was Millwall at home, who are relegation fodder. They'll probably still go down, and that sounds like real sour grapes, doesn't it? But I've got no issue with Millwall. I've got an issue with the fact that we changed our tactics. Now, whether it was something specific that we thought Millwall would do, or whether it was just the Jack Stevens shoehorn coming out again, we've got to get him in the side somewhere. But I was walking across the Itching Bridge, and I was right next to the Samaritan sign again, which is where I always get bad news. And I saw Jack Stevens' name, and then you look down the list and think, oh, who's been sacrificed? And I saw it was the fullback, so I thought it was going to be, the same as the same sort of setup as West Brom. But when the players were lining up, I'm looking at it thinking, hang on, in order to play Stevens, he's now moved 2 of our best players out of position. So Walker-Peters is now on the left, Harwood-Bellis is now right back, and then to add even more to that, Stevens plays in midfield, and that's out of position as well. And that meant that Harwood-Bellis was coming across when we lost the ball, and we had no one at right back. Occasionally they drag Smallbone in there, and if they drag Smallbone in there, then you got no one in midfield. So it just seemed like similar to the Leicester game when we tried all the fullbacks in midfield thing, and we got absolutely shredded. It just seemed that it just made us very, very disjointed. And I think there was an additional problem with Jack Stevens in midfield as well, because Millwall weren't marking him, because why would they? And so he became a magnet for the ball. And so he kept being the spare man. He kept getting the ball. And the trouble is then he gets to it's okay playing a couple of little 10-yard passes or whatever, but sooner or later you've got to cross it, or you've got to put the ball through, or you've got to do something creative. He can't do it because he's a centre half, and it's not his fault. That's just the way it is. So, and I can't help but think it inhibited Joe Aribo as well, because you didn't see him. It just seemed to me like there were too many bodies in there, too many cooks stirring the pot. I think it was a problem. But there you go. With that's what we did. I don't understand why Russell Martin has gone from basically round pegs in round holes. If there's been a like for like swap when people have been injured, and we don't do it. I mean, we're not doing it now. We've discussed Shay Charles. He seems to have fallen foul of something. He's not picked. We had Will Smallbone playing as the defensive midfielder again, and we didn't have the structure around him to help him out like we did against West Brom. So he was getting pulled all over the place. And though Millwall only attacked 2 or 3 times, it just seemed to be very, very disjointed. And I wonder what the likes of, other likes of Matt Gill sort of turning around and saying, "Are you sure this is a good idea?" I do wonder that sometimes. Like we had when Ralph was doing crazy things and Danny Roll had left, we were like, who's telling him that this might not be the best idea? We went 25 games undefeated playing a certain way. And now we're, we seem to be doing something different, and we've lost 3 games in 4. So, it was a bit mystifying. And throughout the second half, I mean, the Huddersfield game when we were behind, I always felt like we had a chance of scoring, and I felt like something was going to happen. Didn't really feel that at any stage in the second half, even though we had a couple of sort of half chances, and we had Adam Armstrong's header at the end, which was probably the best. I didn't really see it coming. And as Steve said, the substitutions, I mean, Adam Armstrong got left out because he'd been poor for the last sort of like 4 or 5 weeks, so probably lacking a bit of confidence. And then you throw him on and Rothwell, who I still haven't got a clue what that guy's about. And it's like, well, that's obviously we had to bring on a Dozy early, but that was the sort of point to change the game on the hour mark. And I just thought those two and taking, as Steve said, taking Shay Adams off, mystifying, because he was playing well, he'd scored a goal, and you take him off and bring on a player who's struggling for confidence at the moment. And I just found it a bit of a mystifying day from Russell Martin, I have to say. And I think there was a little bit of deflection going on at the final whistle as well. Obviously, as Steve said, obviously unhappy with the Millwall tactics, but not really. And then saying, well, I don't blame the referee. But as Steve said, it's about the referee. If I'm sure he's frustrated because Ryan Fraser was obviously taken out by, I think it was Leonard, their right back, who didn't even get booked because it was hot on the heels of a challenge that Tanganga did get booked for. And Fraser was obviously totally done in from that, and he struggled on for 5 minutes and just couldn't keep going. So the refereeing is a bit of an issue, but I think it was a bad day all round. And I just hope Russell Martin goes back to what he talked about in the tactical meeting at the start of the year that myself and Alfie went to, where it was basically about blueprinting, about if the right back gets injured, we bring in another right back, and round pegs and round holes, because at the moment, last few games, we've just not been doing that.
We'll get into the individual goals and things in just a moment. Tom, I mean, we had so many positive podcasts, and you find yourself making your TSP debut, and we're discussing a home defeat to Millwall. So Alfie stitched you right up there. What was your take on the game yesterday, and in particular the tactics and that lineup when you saw that team sheet come through? Because on paper, on the face of it, that should have been a pretty convincing home win.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think it would have been nice to have been selected for one of the other 25 games and have something more positive to talk about than consecutive home defeats to Hull and Millwall. Not great, but obviously you've watched Saints for a while. These things tend to happen, don't they? I mean, my first thought, I have to say, and I did ask Russell Martin about it straight afterwards, was down still isn't there, And I think it's really easy, isn't it, to say, players become much better when they're not in the team sometimes, and it's a system, it's not one player, but. I mean, the stats speak for themselves in terms of how many goals we're conceding without him there. I mean, I can completely agree with what Steve and Glen have said, really, in so many different aspects. I mean, Shay Charles, if you forget his age for a moment, we've paid a lot of money for a player at this level who's got real pedigree, clearly. And strangely, I thought, really struggled at Bristol City, as did a lot of them, and then played, I thought, very well at West Brom, and then is out of the team again. And I'm trying not to sort of kind of pile in too much. And I mean, Alfie put his head above the parapet in the press conference and he expected, I think, Martin to be a bit prickly with his question, and he was. So Alfie sort of said, I'm quoting you directly, Martin, sort of looking at his notes, saying, you said, I want to leave it more to feeling and momentum and not overthink it. And do you think you overthought it today? And he said, no, 2 crap goals. That was it. Nothing to do with where Jack Stevens was playing, the formation, everything like that. So, yeah, he was clearly not in good spirits. And I suppose, what's the saying? Show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser or whatever. So there's nothing wrong with emotion, passion. But I mean, he actually came in and brought up himself, that he'd got in a bit of an argument with a supporter, I think, behind him. And I think Martin's view was, just support the team no matter what, have a go at me, fine. But he was, he was clearly quite emotional. And yeah, it just feels like the balance has gone slightly. It's almost, it's slightly the opposite of the whole game for me, I thought, where I really agree with Steve. I actually thought played pretty well in the first half, and spoke to Adam Blackmore at Solent in half time, and we were saying, how are we possibly sort of losing this game? It was so dominant. And that chap, Glen, mentioned Ryan Leonard. He spoke afterwards and he said, we knew Southampton were a good team, but at half time, they were we didn't know they were that good. We couldn't get sort of near them. We hardly got a touch, he said. And which made it sort of inexplicable how flat it was in the second half, really. I mean, there was a few. I was really pleased to see Aribo starting after he did so well, but I think, as Glenn touched on, he didn't really feature. I don't know if that was more down to him or where he found himself playing. I think David Brooks as well, flashes, clearly got so much ability and talent, but maybe didn't quite do as much as we hoped. And I absolutely agree with the point about Che Adams as well. I couldn't for the life of me see why he was taken off there. So, yeah, it really was a bad day at the office. And, I think, was it 5 points adrift now, aren't we? I think if it is the playoffs, which I guess looks most likely, the thing is you want to be going into them with some momentum. It's probably almost better to be the team in 6th that just sneaks in on an incredible run, isn't it, than the one that sort of falls into it out of form. So that's my concern a bit. But
do you think he's feeling the pressure though, Tom? Do you think he's starting to feel the pressure a little bit? Because, like you say, I watched and I listened to some of the pre-match, post-match stuff, and he brought up the argument that he had with the fan. I probably wouldn't have known anything about that had I not seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen the clip today of him seemingly refusing to shake hands with the Millwall keeper. Whether there's anything in that or not, I don't know. And then he brings up, when you're talking about the game, it was the goals, nothing to do with Jack Stevens. Oh, hang on a minute. We're not talking about the tactics. He's almost like on the front foot a little bit. He seemed, for the first time to me, he seemed a little bit rattled after the game.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think Alfie, I've got to get the impression he sort of sensed that a bit in the last couple of games as well, really. And I suppose he's never been competing right up at this end of the table as a manager, really, yet, has he? And maybe that's it. 12 games to go. It's not a lot. And I mean, he did say, he said, I always hold my hands up when I feel I've got something wrong, but it was nothing to do with the tactics. And I guess it is such fine margins, really, isn't it? I mean, the penalty, like Steve said, could or couldn't be given. I mean, he clearly wasn't going to mention the goalkeeper at all, but quite why Bazunu sort of didn't deal with a relatively straightforward ball. I don't know, and we could easily be talking about a very different result. I mean, Rothwell as well. I mean, it's so easy, isn't it, to sort of pick everything apart? But you think in the January window, for me, left back's been a problem all season. I mean, I think Ryan Manning has had some good games, and I wouldn't sort of scapegoat him. But I think as you saw against Hull, if he's exposed, in a one-on-one situation, he absolutely doesn't have the pace, and that's a real problem. And then we're trying to shoehorn other players in there. Magoma, I think, wasn't on the bench. He's done quite well when he's been in. Larios is there and back in training, we're here. But, obviously with the injury record, can't rely on that. So that to me would have, that was a position which needed looking at far more than, I guess, sort of Rothwell as the sort of another 8. And yeah, I mean, he's clearly got some ability. He scored 2 great goals, didn't he, against Huddersfield? But I mean, that was a sitter he missed yesterday. And I don't know. I mean, I think he is feeling the pressure. Yeah, to answer your question, Steve, definitely. I think he's quite an emotional guy, anyway, isn't he? And, I'll be a hypocrite if I said I didn't like that when it's when I see him celebrating with fans after we won the game. But you just hope. I think Glenn, I really agree with Glenn. You hope there's people around him. He's mentioned Colin Calderwood a few times, doesn't he? He's a kind of steady older head. You hope that they can just perhaps kind of keep him sort of level and grounded and sticking to the things that have served us pretty well so far.
Is part
something
of the
Alfie
problem... Go on,
hang on, man. Something Alfie said couple of times was that Russell Martin finds it really stressful when we have, or really hard work when we have a 3-game week. So maybe the fact that we've had 3 or 4 of those on a spin, basically, we've been playing midweek every week including next week against Liverpool. I think it's 4 weeks in a row where we've had a midweek game. So maybe it's just he's frazzled, and that explains the sort of prickly demeanour. But hopefully it doesn't explain slightly weird team selections. But I can't get my head around that. I still can't. But yeah, maybe he's just sort of like feeling the pressure a little bit, like Tom says, of being up the top of the league and having we got to get promoted this year. That's the bottom line for him, isn't it? That's what he was brought in to do. And so and pressure and stress makes people do strange things, doesn't it? So,
do you think part of the problem, Glenn, though, is that we don't know at the moment what the best 11 is? And you think back to the sort of the start of the winning run, we knew each week what the starting 11 was going to be. Now, there's been a couple of injuries. We've had some players that have come in January. Obviously, the games have been coming thick and fast, so you'd expect a few changes. But I think if we all wrote down our best starting 11, it would probably be a little bit different.
I think the problem is that, for me, we have 3 absolutely key players. They're the 2 centre-halves and Flynn Downs. And losing one of those, Jack Stephens would be fine as a replacement for one of the centre-halves. I'm sure, given a run of games there, he'd be fine. But losing Flynn Downs, and we've tried various things to replace that, and we haven't found it. And we all knew that Flynn Downs was a massively important player for us, given the way that we play, because with the way we play, keeping possession, getting players forward, we are always going to be liable for the counter attack, and Flynn Downs is that insurance policy because of his pace and his tenacity, the way he gets across the park. That's the problem we've got, is that we've lost him. I think that's the biggest deal. And if he's not fit, if there's something we're not being told, apparently he was in training videos and whatnot before the game. So you would think he's not far away, but I just think it's as simple as you've got to trust the player who naturally plays that position and play him and not disrupt basically a third of the team just to bring in one certain player. Trust the player who plays the position. I think it's playing players in their best position is a vastly underrated thing for a lot of managers. And I just think we have to go back to that, back to basics. Stop trying to overcomplicate things.
So 12 games to go, Steve. Put your Mystic Meg outfit on. You obviously saw the game on Friday night, Leeds and Leicester. I think we all said the worst possible result for us would be a Leeds win, and so it came to pass. So all we needed to do was win, and it was okay. Obviously, Ipswich winning as well. Is that it for the automatics, do you think, or are you in there's still a lot of football to play camp?
Not necessarily. We've got 12 games to go, and that's 36 points. That's a lot of points. Leeds might win every single game for the remainder of the year. I don't think they will. But it's still up for grabs. Leicester showed in that last 15 minutes, as soon as Leeds never looked like scoring in that second half until the moment they did. Leicester should have been 4 or 5-0 up, missed a hatful of absolute sitters, and made a bizarre double substitution that made them just killed all their momentum. Leeds get the equaliser out of nothing, and then all of a sudden they sense blood, and Leicester fell apart. And there's a chance that Leicester continue to fall apart. I still don't think the top 2 is completely out of reach. It's 5 points. That's potentially 2 games. Who knows? Leeds have got a couple of away local derbies coming up. And they've got to play Millwall, who at home, who I think they've got quite a bad record against at home. So that's not out of the question. Ipswich, we've seen, can have these little runs of being a little bit iffy. Maybe they stutter again at some point. Leicester have got obviously we've got to go to Leicester in 3 weeks' time. hopefully we're back to kind of full strength by then, because I think, I mean, with our full strength 11 out on the field, I think we give anybody in this division a run for their money.
Do you agree, Tom? I've got a message from Chris during the week. He says, can we have a little bit of positivity, please, amongst the inevitable, when he was talking about tonight? Is there a bit of positivity? Is it that there's still a lot of football to come?
Yeah, there is. And I think, player for player, I mean, as I said, my personal thought was the playoffs, not just after this week, but, I thought probably over the 46 games, we wouldn't have enough to be up there with Leicester and Leeds, and I'd love to be proven wrong, of course. But, if it comes down to a one-off game, I think we know there's so much talent in the squad, and there's players at the moment who are absolutely not playing probably anywhere near their ceiling. And if we are in the playoffs, I don't think we should really fear anyone in there. I mean, it has been a good season overall, isn't it? It's so easy to kind of, I think Taylor Howard-Bellis was doing the sort of player post-match duty yesterday, and he kind of said, some of the noise is unbelievable. You'd think we're in a relegation battle or whatever. But, so, yeah, you have got to keep these things in perspective. And I think we got players. I mean, it's interesting that on the left side yesterday. So just going back a moment, we were talking about that. Walker Peters and Edozie there. I mean, in terms of like individual skill level, they had far too much for the players they were playing against. I think part of the problem was they were both right-footed players playing on the left, and things tended to slow down a bit where they had to sort of check back in. So these are all things that can be sorted out. I think momentum, confidence, all those things matter. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Fraser now, because I think he was on crutches at the end of the game. So you hope that's not too long term, because I feel like he's a big player for those moments that we might need now. But I mean. I'm not probably the first person my friends would say you'd come to for optimism when it comes to Saints. So it's a tricky position you put me in.
Welcome to the podcast.
So Steve has got me feeling a bit better about things. It is only 2 games potentially, but there's plenty of life left in us yet. That's for sure. And Russell Martin said that as well. This can still be a really memorable season, no doubt. In the 8 weeks, whatever we've got left. So it's going to be. I think we're going to have to sort of buckle in for a difficult ride. I don't know if I could cope with the playoffs if we are there, but we'll deal with that when we come to it.
Just get it in the calendar, just in case. Most difficult question of the week has got to be TSP Player of the Week. I guess maybe somebody like Jack Stephens. Glenn, it's another one of those weeks where there isn't really anybody that scores above a 5 or a 6, to be honest, is there? But if we were going to have to put a Twitter poll together with a couple of names on it, can we get scratched around and get 2, do you think?
Well, from yesterday's game, basically. Yeah. Che Adams.
Yep.
Che Adams, I thought, played pretty well. Stuart Armstrong had a good game as well. He looked. It was a totally different player to what played against Hull. He looked much more interested. He beat 3 players down the wing in the opening 30 seconds of the game, and that was more than he did in the entire game against Hull. So I'd say he was okay. Defenders were all a bit. At the end of the day, we let in 2 goals against Millwall, so you can't really look too much at the defenders. So I'd say Che Adams, Stuart Armstrong. No one really made an impression off the bench, as Steve said. So those 2.
Yeah. Strange, wasn't it? It was the first week you look at the bench and go, "There's not really much there." Steve, any shouts for Player of the Week?
Not sure I can advance any more suggestions. To be honest, it was weird, especially as I say, I thought we were decent first half, but the problem is that second half was just so lethargic that it's kind of blown away any potential goodwill I had in me. Yeah. Adams, Stu Armstrong. Struggling. Edozie was bright first half, I thought, in fairness. And second half, he was kind of the only one that was still looking to at least take on the fullback, even if he didn't get round him that often. He obviously got shunted across to the right instead of his what seems to be his favourite left side. To allow Sulemana to slot in there. But he was okay, I guess.
Anyone we missed, Tom?
I don't think so. No, it's slim pickings this week, isn't it? It's tricky. I think, strangely, I actually thought the defenders were sort of okay mostly. I mean, they didn't have much to defend against because Millwall hardly crossed the halfway line. I guess you sort of think not because of the penalty, but I thought Bednarek was okay. But yeah, I mean, the attacking players really were disappointing, I think, other than perhaps Adams for me. So I guess I'd probably be inclined to go with him.
All right, we'll add him to the list, and we'll get that poll up on social media.